Hello, I'm Sam from Jessup Says. The focus of my channel is to share and educate on how to buy less, buy better. It's not necessarily about buying less things, it's about buying something that fits its purpose perfectly and serves you for as long as possible. This week I wanted to tackle a bit of a different topic, one that I've been thinking about since we finished up the Wayman Bespoke series, and that is simply, how do we know if our shoes fit? I actually get this question fairly often. It's a pretty rough time when you've just invested into a pair of nice buy less, buy better boots or shoes. They arrive and you're all excited to put them on, and then immediately you think to yourself, oh my gosh, do these actually fit properly? Or I don't know, it's a really scary and kind of intimidating feeling. One that I still fear on pretty much every package. But knowing if you've got the right size is actually a little bit more straightforward than it seems based on the sort of commonly used techniques that I've seen out there. I also encourage anyone out there who thinks that they know their shoes fit to watch this video, because in my experience, quite a lot of people have been sized incorrectly at some point in their lives, and they're just wearing shoes that don't actually fit. This happened to me. Up until I started this shoe journey a few years ago, I thought that I had a size sort of US 9 foot. It turns out I'm more like a US 7, 7.5, but it did take me 10 years of being an adult to figure that one out. So, there's no shame in it. So today we're not going to talk about fingers or gaps or toe wiggling. I've figured out a much simpler and easier method to figure out if your shoes or boots fit. And I actually based it on a podcast that I heard by Stitchdown named The Shoecast. It was an episode they released in May 2021 with a man named Ron Ryder from Ryder Boot Company, where he discusses how he's been fitting people for boots over his extensive career. He was saying how he would feel the foot in the boot or shoe and make sure that the shape of the boot or shoe lines up with the curves and the lines of the feet. I found that sort of a fascinating idea. He also mentioned that a boot or shoe should fit exactly the same if our toes are chopped off, because our toes really serve no function in terms of keeping our feet in our shoes, which I thought made sense. And it's kind of a fascinating idea because, of course, a boot or shoe should follow our curves on our foot. But how does wiggling my toes have anything to do to prove that a shoe fits? And why do we use that as sort of the main way to know if a shoe fits? Doesn't make sense when you really think about it. Anyway, I ran with this idea and did some fairly extensive testing, shall we say, across my various loafers, shoes, and boots. Today I hope to share what I've learned with you and hopefully help someone out there that's feeling like they aren't sure if their boots or shoes are feeling or fitting right, and have the confidence to understand what they're meant to be looking for and then know whether it is a good fit and either send them back to get another size or start that wonderful breaking in period. Also, a disclaimer, I am not a doctor. Shh. So this is not orthopedically recommended or anything like that. This is just my thoughts on the situation and I'm just trying to help. So typically when it comes to fit, there are two different things that you'll immediately think. Either these are too tight or these are too loose. Now, first of all, I wanted to address the fact that Goodyear welted shoes and boots feel very differently on the foot to a pair of sneakers or a pair of, cheap cement glued shoes. Though the technique that I'm going to talk about and use, it does work for both, but just be aware that they will feel differently. So if you're not used to that feeling, take that into account as you're going through these motions. It's not unusual to put a pair on and think, wow, these are firm, or they don't flex, the leather is too tight, the laces don't close properly, my toes feel really squished, or my feet feel really squished. Or I don't know, that's the ones that I hear most often, so there you go. I want to assure you that this is all part of it. It's normal. It doesn't necessarily tell you if the shoes fit or not, and you need to persevere past this point and actually try and get the shoes on. If you can't get them on, then they're probably too small. So let's talk about the technique. If you've got your shoe or boot on, or maybe even a sneaky loafer, and you're wondering if it fits correctly, this is what you do. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the focus is using your hands to feel through the leather and establish where the foot and shoe are either lining up or not lining up. I like to start with the archway, feeling along from where my heel is at the back. You should feel that this is sort of sitting in a heel cup if it's fitting correctly. And then you want to feel the leather curve along the side of the foot, up your arch, as much as the shape of the shoe permits, the leather to follow that as closely as possible. I find that this is actually the fastest way to get a good idea of fit. You always want your arches to be supportive in the right way, or it'll be a pretty painful wear-in experience. Some shoes in this area curve a lot, like my Wayman Bespokes, and they follow my foot very, very closely. Other shoes don't really curve at all, like a loafer for instance, but you have to do your best to assess if the curve is roughly the same shape and in the same area as your archway. Then you want to focus on the wide part on the inside ball joint where the big toe connects basically, and on the outside where the pinky toe joint is. You want these parts to align with the widest part of the shoe because they are typically the widest part of your foot. Use your hands to press in and ensure these parts are roughly aligned. It may not be perfect, but if you feel that these parts are once again roughly aligned and the archway feels roughly aligned, then this is a pretty good sign that they're a good size for you. If either of these parts feel misaligned, then the shoe could be either too short or too narrow or wide for your foot. The arch feeling is typically representative of the length of the shoe, with the width being obviously the width of the shoe. So that should help you to analyze where the fit needs improvement. Or it is even possible or more likely that the last of the shoe, or rather the shape that the manufacturer intended that shoe to be in, doesn't agree with your foot. This is actually very, very, very common, but no one ever really seems to talk about it. If this is a case and the shoe just doesn't seem to fit your foot, you try a half size up or a half size down, and you try a D width or a double E width, and you find that for whatever reason the shoe just doesn't fit, I would strongly suggest you try another last from the same maker or another brand altogether to find something that does fit your foot. The final check, once you've traced the outline of your foot and you're fairly confident that each measurement is good, is to flex the foot in the shoes, like you would if you're sort of taking a step and launching off your back foot. Once you've done that a few times, and as you do it, not so many times as to crease the leather too much, but as you're doing it, you want to look at where the leather is, where it's creasing, where it's folding, and you want that to sort of line up with where you would expect it to on the shoe, basically where, your toes bend. It should be just below the laces, but not too high, not too close to the sort of toe cap if there is one. This is sort of a last visual way of checking that the foot is flexing the boot or shoe how it's intended to be flexed. And you also want to make sure that, it looks aesthetically pleasing, especially if you've got something like cordovan. You want those rolls to be nice and all the creases to be in the right spot. Now, of course, I realize that all feet are different, and you may feel like, based on everything we've talked about, that they're just not something. A common one is that the laces don't close because the shoes are too tight, sort of across the lace vamp area. Now, assuming that the manufacturer has put the right lace length in, something that you want to check. But if you still can't close the laces, then you likely have a foot that's got a lot of volume across the vamp area, and maybe that last isn't designed to account for that. On a loafer, this might be shown by sort of flaring out around the collar. This can also be from having low arches, I believe, but again, I'm not a doctor, so if that is a problem for you, there are Redditors out there that I'm sure can provide suggestions for you, as I have seen it discussed quite a lot. Another one is that if your toes feel cramped, this may be time to consider if you're just used to wearing larger shoes and you've gotten used to having more toe room than your size may actually permit. I do know someone like that, in which case that I'd suggest looking for a last that has more volume in the toe. They're pretty easy to find from most brands, but just get your size right. I'm not sure what other thoughts, fears you may be thinking about, but if I haven't addressed it anywhere here, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or comment down below so we can all benefit from the questions, and hopefully someone can answer if I can't. And that about wraps it up. Hopefully, if you've got this far, you've got an answer to the question, do my shoes fit? Hopefully you are better able to assess why that may or may not be. Finding a shoe or boot that fits your exact foot perfectly isn't easy and does take time. But I think the best way to get the perfect shoe, if there is one, or to be more accurate, the perfect last, is to make less expensive mistakes along the way. I know of people out there who have, many expensive shoes and boots that they just don't wear because they just don't like the fit of that. And I think we should try and avoid that, shan't we? Anyway, thanks very much for listening. Appreciate your time as always, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Cheers.